here for Lightwave Digital. Because it's the third anniversary of Lightwave Digital taking over Lightwave, and it also happens to be the 20th anniversary of me starting on Battlestar Galactica full time in the visual effects department in house at the Vancouver Film Studios in Vancouver, Canada, I thought it would be appropriate for me to go and do a little bit of a flashback sequence from the series and build something out using Lightwave 2025.0.1 when all of these scenes that I'm going to be using originally were built in either 8.2 or 8.5 way back in 2005. I had actually done an episode in 2004, but that was on set and doing high-speed motion control camera work. So I didn't get into the actual visual effects department until April of 2025. And one of the first things I had to do was start building out shots, as well as start building out machines to render them. Um, let's get started by starting off with something that we can sink our teeth into. And I can also talk about a few other things that come along with the moving of older assets over to Lightwave in the modern era. As I said, these were mostly built in Lightwave 7.5C, Lightwave 8.2, 8.5. And as a result, the old shading system is in play. The old shading, old rendering, and a lot of those things didn't necessarily convert over. And even in later versions prior to 2018, started to be broken. So this is basically a straight load of the original 2005 asset build. And this is a specific build that I actually did that features a animated deck crew and some land rams, which you rarely see on the series. So we got some dudes on there. They're being driven through MDDs. And we've got some vehicle moving around. So generally some pretty cool stuff. Just to give the shot some flavor later on when we would have close-ups like this. I think we used this setup about 3 or 4 times prior to season 2, episode 10, which would have been Pegasus. And Pegasus was kind of the inspiration for this because we're going to pull that ship in as well. That was a very big episode. And then, of course, Resurrection Ship was 211 211B, or what they would call 212. We would have won the Emmy Award for that year, but they split the episode in half and submitted it as one episode. And the rules are that you can only have one episode that's aired on the night, and you can't submit 2 episodes back to back, split between a week. So we got disqualified. So smooth move, Mike Gibson. You should have looked up the rules. Anyway, the Galactica is in here now. Let's take a look at what's actually involved with this ship, because I did have to make some very subtle changes to it to make it look kind of right. And it really came down to lights. These lights in here are bolted to a Battlestar Galactica Light Master null. Back when we originally started doing the show, even before I joined, they were working in 2 gigabyte memory limits for render and system RAM. Very, very restricting. So the Galactic itself couldn't actually be rendered in a single shot. It had to be broken up. There were sections that could be swapped out, like the front would be swapped out if we didn't have to see it. We were seeing the ship from the back or from a hard angle, and we could render it with matte objects to get the whole ship to come back together in compositing. But once I got onto the show, I forced them basically in-house to upgrade all their machines to Windows XP. All the machines actually had 4 gigabytes of RAM in them at that time, but they were running a 32-bit OS, and they were also running the 32-bit version of Lightwave. Lightwave was in 8.5 beta at the time, which gave us 64-bit capability, which meant expanded RAM access. And then, of course, when we got Lightwave 9, that also gave us the perspective camera technology, which gave us a RAM or a speed boost in the renderer by 2.5 to 2.6 times. When I actually showed my visual effects supervisor, Gary Hutzel, that we get that kind of boost, he's like, oh, yes, I like that very much. And well, yes, he did. Because it allowed us to take on larger shots or more shots, and we were able to actually render shots bigger than the stuff that was coming out of Zoic and Atmosphere, because they were all still stuck on 32-bit. So interesting little tidbit of information there, but let's keep going. The idea with these assemblies was so that we could do load items from scene anytime that we wanted to bring individual pieces in. These days, I can pretty much bring the whole thing in and render it without any issues. It's all easily fittable in RAM. There's no problems with that. So I don't really have any issues with bringing this in at all, and I can hit VPR, and VPR will swallow it very, very quickly, and we get a render that's actually not too far off from the original Lightwave 8 and Lightwave 9 renders. There are a couple subtle differences in here. One of the big issues is that in the change from Lightwave 2015 to Lightwave 2018 with the new render engine and shading system is that we lost the capability of lights to have different types of fall off intensities. So now we just get off in inverse distance. If I selected all of these to be inverse distance, we would get some very, very hot lights. And those hot lights would be extremely hot because of the way that the surfaces were built. So it doesn't really translate anymore. So what I've done is I've basically taken these lights off in the side and turned them down and made some small adjustments, but they're pretty close. This has actually come out pretty good. Now, to light this ship, we've got a Rad Faker, which is just the Lightwave environment light. If you followed my videos in the past, I usually use a DuPont DP light, and those plugins will actually become part of Lightwave very shortly. They're working on that now, but for right now, I'm just using the environment light, which kind of does the same thing. And then we've got a key soft, which is a distant light, and it's got a degree angle of 2, and it's got effect specular and effect diffuse on. Now, this is going to have to go away though when I load another ship in, because that other ship is the Pegasus, and it was built very, very quickly and not with the right kind of idea behind its textures. So it blows out really badly under normal conditions. So we have to make some changes to it. But we'll get the other ship in here in a second. But before we do that, I want to put some animation on this Galactica. So what we'll do here is we'll select that parent null, and we're going to give ourselves some animation space here. Go 240 frames, and we'll take the Galactica and we're going to turn off its channels here just so I can move it on an axis, single axis, very easily. Okay, something like so. So it's 1.2 kilometers away from where it started, and we'll just pull it back at 0, but I want to be a little bit closer. I'm going to drag it in a little bit. Okay, that's pretty good. And now let's take a look at camera view here. Okay, now this isn't too bad. I don't mind this placement for this camera. Let's take their camera, and we're gonna push it in a little bit because I want to see those dudes on the deck doing their thing. Okay, and we're gonna pop it in there, and I think that'll be a pretty good spot for us to be. Now, generally, I like to have some guides to this. So let's hit D, and we're gonna go to display. Go to general. Don't need the origin, so I'm going to just turn that off. Camera view. Let's go to the overlays. I want rule of thirds, obviously, and the overlay section, I want to show the safe areas. So outer blue line or rectangle is for action, and the inner blue line or rectangle is for titles. So if we had titles in here, you'd want to make sure that those titles would appear inside of this. And then for action, if you had action that was necessary, you'd need this. Even though we are rendering the full frame in HD, that's what you would get. Now, a couple of other things with the camera. On Galactica, to save render time, we actually rendered in-house at 1280 by 720 and then blew it up to 1920 by 1080. It was resized. There was also a memory reason for this because of that 2 gigabyte memory limit. Anything that we could do to shave some of that stuff down to fit it into that 2 gigabyte memory limit without having to build a bunch of scenes that would be actually combined and composite to make one shot. We could put more stuff in and then just render it out, and then it'd be easier for the compositors, and we'd let the computers do the work. But until that 2 gigabyte memory limit was removed and we started putting these machines in before, and 8 gigabytes of RAM, by today's standards, doesn't sound like much, but it was a huge, massive difference in our production workflow. You're welcome, Hudson and Gibson. Okay, now I've got something in here. I know where my framing is. Let's do a little bit more of a reframe here. We're gonna put it just over top of that little vehicle right there. And we're going to go to the start. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to start ourselves a little bit more like so. And this will give us some space up here for another ship, which we can now load in. But before we do that, let's go and save this. Okay, so go shots. You just save it right over top of that. That's fine. Okay, and now we can go and load the Pegasus. Okay, load items from scene. Go to assemblies. Go and grab the Pegasus. Here, the one with the light fixes and some texture fixes as well. I'm going to grab all of this, including the lights, because I actually want the lighting from this scene because it was better than the one that we've got here for the Galactica. So we can see down here, I've got another envelope or environment light and a key diff and a key spec. These are actually parented together in the scene once I get it in there. And we're also going to bring in another tool here under the image filter plugins, which you would always load, and it was called flare to alpha. This gives us lens flares that will show up in alpha channels. Very handy for doing engines that are behind an object or whatever it might be. So they show up in alpha channels. So this ship is quite big, and when it comes in, it's going to plop itself right dead center in the scene, and we need to move this. So before we do that, though, let's get rid of our original lights that were in here. So that was the rad key. Boom, boom. Get rid of that, and we'll use the ones that I've got in here instead. Again, very simple environment light, 25%. Doesn't affect specular because I'm emulating what we did originally when we would render with the spinning light trick. If you don't know what that is, you'll have to do some Google searching on that. It's a very interesting technique that allowed for Lightwave to really do some amazing shots before anybody even had radiosity in any of their software. And even still, when we did get radiosity, we would use the spinning light tricks for doing lighting fill, and it would do a really good job in comp of making sure that all the darkest areas weren't totally dark of a ship, and we weren't in any kind of issues with the composites going ultra black in certain areas. So we're going to call this Rad Faker again. All right. And we're going to place the Pegasus somewhere a little less crazy. I'm going to shrink this Battlestar hierarchy down. And let's talk a little bit about these lights. I had to make some adjustments to these. Because the Pegasus was textured in kind of a bizarre way, it didn't conform to what the Galactica actually had on it. Beautifully done. It just, the textures were overdriven deliberately in a lot of ways. And it was not something that they intended to really have on cameras for as long as they did, and recycled and recycled. I believe the original cost to build the Pegasus was about $60,000 Canadian, which at that time the Canadian US dollar was about par. But it was done very quickly. I think it was done in about 8 or 9 weeks, and it actually was under construction when I first joined the show. So they were already working on that model well before that episode aired. So by a good 8 or 9 months. Now, I've had to turn effect specular off because these textures, when brought into Lightwave in 2025, because of the surfacing changes and the way that the render engine shifts, they are going to blow out the surfaces because I don't have the default intensity for this, which was inverse. Uh, yeah, inverse distance rather than inverse distance squared, so it was a little bit less harsh. And because we only have these two different fall off modes, it's either off and turn the specularity off, which pretty much gives me the look that I want, or I can start going to these lights and going into the nodes and then start wiring that stuff up, which would drive me nuts because there's literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lights on here. So we don't want to go through that kind of hassle. This is the quickest way to get it done. So these are all bolted to various portions of the ship, typically with a null in the center, so you can load them in anytime. And this Pegasus model does have its engines with the glow behind flares on them. So we can see the actual lens flares are used as an engine in this case. So if we turn VPR on really quick, we'll see a good example of that. So you can see just a little bit of glow back there. Be a little bit more prevalent from different angles, but there is a actual glow back there. If you don't believe me, we can just turn this up. Let's go 5. There's a little bit more of it. Really, I'd have to go in and adjust the flares itself. So for now, this is just fine. So we're going to turn this off, and we're going to turn VPR off, and we're going to place this ship to make a little bit more sense. So let's go and hit objects, and we go with the drop-down menu just selected. We go Pegasus, so we can type and search for that stuff now. Searching through lists manually is a major drag. So again, I'm going to use the right arrow bracket keys, the right bracket keys, so I can zoom my grid out, so I can place this ship a little bit easier. All right, that's not a bad spot for it. Let's take a look at a perspective view. You don't like battle stars flying too close to each other. It's not something you want to do on a weekend. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right. Okay, so that's it. Keyframe 1 or 0. So we're going to give it some flight. Okay. Excuse me. Now we need something a little bit more exciting for camera work here. All right. So camera, using the rule of thirds, we're going to pop the upper left hand crosshair up towards the nose of the Pegasus. Okay. And we're not going to go, super herky jerky on this. This is not one of those action shots, but we will put in some additional keyframes here. Just reframe it up to that side. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, that's pretty cool. Then we can bring ourselves down to here. Okay, we give ourselves a little bit of a rock on the camera. Boom. Okay, very good. And we'll bring ourselves right down to that ram. Give that crosshair in there. Maybe just give ourselves a little bit of the rock on the camera. Bank it just slightly. Okay. And we'll just reframe just slightly. And for this, because everybody loves those snappy zooms, let's take a look at what this would be with it zoomed in a little bit more. 200 millimeters. Let's use 0.024. Let's go 50. That's better. So reframe it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then here, I'll give ourselves a keyframe on the zoom channel and pull this keyframe here and pull ourselves back 0.024. There we go. And we'll smooth these out. That linear, this one, just be spline, give it maximum tension. So now we've got something that's like, okay, a little bit weird to do it that way. So let's go the other way. Let's take this envelope and we'll go keys. Where it's selected. It's a little bit better. Okay, so we're gonna get a real nice close-up shot there. And we need something a little bit extra in this scene. Let's just reframe this camera position. On the nose. Right, so a little bit of camera work there, nothing crazy. Let's save this. Sure, I'll overwrite that. That's fine. Let's go back to frame 0 and let's go and load items from scene. Let's get ourselves a raptor. We'll do this one. Interesting note, I made all the different assembly variants for that. There are 4 of them, and they were called talons. Okay, so that's what we've got for these. Actually have a, yep, okay, cool. There we go. One raptor coming in. Okay, raptors are very small, so we got to go and give them somewhere to be. So our raptor is way over here, the center of the scene. Let's make sure that we've got it selected. Shrink all this stuff up. Okay, so there's the raptor. I don't need these 2 nulls that came in with it. And we don't need this dead center of the shot, so we can move it around. Okay. So let's take this and go to the top view. So we're gonna have this guy come in for a landing, more or less. All right, so we'll move it back over here, back over here. Okay, and that's probably a pretty good spot for it. Let's go to the end. And take these 2 axes off for the moment, and we'll zip it into the shot. Back to perspective view. Just see where it is. Enable these just a little bit. See where this actual raptor is. Okay, cool. We're gonna zoom back in a little bit so that it's not overly responsive when I'm selecting things, and we'll give him, a good opportunity to get in here, flying over top these other guys, going in for landing. Okay. And to line things up a little bit. This, I'm gonna pull him up. Or move that start null up a little bit as well. So let's see what kind of path he takes. So I want something that kind of flies through camera or past camera. It levels off and then pulls in. Very cool. Perspective view. Start him off a little bit higher. Comes in kind of right next to camera. More. Lower. Nice dramatic shot, crosses frame there, goes in for a landing, whatever it might be. All right, so that's cool. Let's save this. We'll call this revision 2. Let's engage VPR here for a second and take a look at some of the look here. So there's our flares for the Pegasus for the engine. Unfortunately, Galactica doesn't have any right now, but this is an okay, lighting look. It's a little bit under dramatic for what we need. So let's take our light here, that is our key light in the scene, and change its direction to something a little bit more nominal. Let's go 35 on that. It's not too bad. Okay, so when our Raptor flies by a camera, get a good shot of Pegasus. You can see its internals, all the goodies. Right there. Of course, it doesn't have its engines on right now. That's something I'll have to rebuild at some point in the future. But once it comes in for landing here, the lights from the internal landing bay will start to illuminate it. It gives us a good composition. So that Raptor would have just passed by underneath. So let's go back a few frames. A few more. Yeah, it's going to look great. Well, it's rendered, of course. All right, so now I've got that in there. We need some extra stuff. So let's go back to texture shade solid mode, and we're going to fire this off to a save here. Save scene. Boom. Okay. Let's get ourselves some Vipers in here. So load items from scene. Let's go. We always like the Mark IIs. The Mark IIs are way sexier than the Space Dolphin Mark 7s. Okay, so here's Starbucks branded Viper. Okay, so we'll pull that in. Okay, and just working with its null. It's basically going to sit in the center of the scene. So let's see what this thing is. Yeah, very cool. Let's get this Viper flying cap. So essentially just accompanying the Galactica and the Pegasus. So let's zoom out again and zoom back in using the magnifying glass. See my grid change here so that I can more quickly move ships from point A to point B. And we'll just reposition here so it's not stuck inside the ship. Give it some headroom here. Cool. And for something like this, that Viper more or less just fly straight on its CX axis towards camera. Let's see. That one's not too bad. Let's take a look at its end position here. So yeah, forward a bit. Okay. And go to camera view. And if we want to pull this into something a little bit more scary or dramatic, let's go to the animate move path, and let's move that path a little bit more into the zone here where it crosses camera. Viper pilots doing their thing. All right. So somewhere in the middle here, we need to get this guy to make a maneuver so he isn't smacking the side of the ship. So we'll just do something like this. Right. See what that looks like in camera. See how much we actually catch. So it's on the edge. Again, for more dramatic effect, we can pull this one forward and have it literally fly past camera as the Raptor comes in for a landing. Kind of using the opposite rule of thirds upper right hand corner crosshair to give us some drama to that. Very cool. All right, so that's one. Let's save this for 3. And let's pop in another Viper. This one, we'll go and grab the Space Dolphin. Let's take a look at what comes in the hierarchy. Okay, so all good. This one also can be something that's passing by camera in a similar fashion. Let's go take a look at it, the perspective view. Okay, so it's pretty much good to go. Let's move its path way back down here. So a path for animation. Let's zip back over. Cool. Don't really need to do much. It's not flying fancy. We've got ourselves a built-out shot now. Granted, there would be background ships and obviously more craft, probably another flight of at least 12 or additional Vipers. That can be very easily achieved through working with a array instances, something similar. Probably a couple of the fleet ships from the colonies. But for the most part, we're basically in a state where this would have been considered good for previs to send off to quick render and get it into editorial and get it rock and rolling. A couple more things here before we do that though. I would very much like to put my Star Pro on here, and I have a preset for this, so let's go Star Pro. Yep, Infinity Cross. Yeah, we'll just work on the scattered stars. Okay, and Spot size. 1.5 is pretty good. All right. Let's make sure our camera is set nicely with some motion blur on this. Okay, so we need probably about 4 steps of that. And motion blur, let's go 38 instead of 50, so it's not so drastic. Obviously, I would be rendering this for previs back then at this resolution and probably at 50% just to get it out the door. Otherwise, I'd be doing a make preview and setting that off. But with make previews, we found that producers and directors, always were getting lost as to what's what. So we would bang out, uh, somewhat or quick shaded renders, and the idea was that there wouldn't be a bunch of rotation head null or other things in the scene that would cause them to be confused about what's what. So let's find ourselves a good spot here. Okay, there's a good spot with the Raptor. Let's do an F9 here and see how long this actually takes. But in 20-30 minutes, I'm able to build out a shot using these assemblies. And that was the key to Galactica, was being able to reuse all of these assemblies over and over again to do these establishing shots and then do the big stuff. But we'd always have the assemblies that were the basis for how these would be put together. And this is why a TV series like this is cheaper to do, but increases in costs after a certain period of time because they want more stuff for the big finales or whatever it might be. And the assets get recycled over and over and over again, but they go through minor changes so that there's some kind of continuity for damage being hit on a ship or whatever it might be, that Galactica being beat to hell by the end of the series. Those types of things obviously get built in, but the secret of how Lightwave made all this work was we were able to take these shots, put them together very, very quickly, and then pump them through render and get them over to the compositing team and have them back across, sometimes within just a few hours. This is the reason why Lightwave was and still is so critical to shows like this, and it's because we can build out shots very quickly, get them in and out of render, get them over to compositing, and have finished shots in a very, very short period of time. And the formula for building all this stuff out dates back 30, 35 years now, going back to shows that were done on even less memory. Instead of 2 GB, try 2 or 4 megabytes of chip RAM on the Amigas. So things have obviously progressed technology wise. Things have changed technology wise, but I can still go back to these old shots and pull them forward and get great results out of them. Now, this is going to be a render that turns out a little bit lower quality than I would like, but that's just due to the fact that I haven't dialed a couple of things in. However, I could very easily, spend another 15, 20 minutes on getting the motion blur the way that I want, and make sure I've got maybe some little bit of depth of field in there, although I do depth of field in comp. And obviously I'd have to rebuild all my engines because the volumetric system changed. But for me to say that it would be quite easy for us to take Battlestar Galactica from 20 years ago and pull it forward to Lightwave today and start doing redo shots in like 4 or 8K is very, very doable. We have all the assets there, all the original stuff. Obviously, we make some upgrades and improve certain things because some stuff doesn't hold up anymore. But it's not the software; it's the way that they were designed to fit inside of the computers of the limitations of that time. So yeah, we would be able to definitely do a remastered or a reissued edition without too much trouble, which makes you wonder why the proposed Battlestar Galactica reboot didn't go forward. Well, it's because they weren't using Lightwave and they ran into budget expenditures that were ridiculous. Had they gone with a Lightwave workflow pipeline as the proposal, likely would have been on the air and in season 2 or 3 by now. But nope, somebody screwed up, and Sam Esmail is not the kind of person I would want attaching himself to a property like Battlestar Galactica. It'd be pretty scary. So anyway, this is rendering along. We've got a lot of stuff in here. The actual memory consumption on this isn't so bad. I've done much larger shots with much larger stuff. But we can see that right now it's taking up 23 gigabytes of memory. And a lot of that is simply due to the fact that we've got a 1920 by 1080 render size And of course, we've got the models and everything else that are in here. Now, I haven't dialed any of this stuff in for optimization. It was just to get it in there. And the thing that you remember is that these are using the emulated shader for the standard materials from the previous versions of these Lightwave versions of these ships were created in. So it's an emulation. If these were all converted over to physically based render surfaces, principal BSDF or conductor or other materials that work off of the new shading system would actually go faster because it's not an emulation, and we would get nicer, higher quality results. That is a given, but even still, I'm cranking this out, and I would never dream to have something like this be able to be popped in both ships, plus Raptor, Viper, well, two Vipers. This would be broken out into multiple passes and then rendered individually back then 20 years ago. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Obviously, Lightwave 2025.0.1 is available. If you've been away from Lightwave for a while and you want to get back into it, make sure you go to lightwave3d.com and check out the pricing systems there for you to get back in. You can upgrade from any previous version of Lightwave that you have to the current version, and it's a very, very affordable choice.